So, Huples Cat, happy Easter Monday. Can you imagine what it would be like if your country was invaded by a foreigner and conquered in war and actually occupied? This series is called Invasion, and we're going to look at realistic, historical based aspects of that type of an activity.
What's it like in Germany?
Must be terrible.
Well, they asked for it, they got it.
Yes, but you can't let them starve.
I don't know about that. I got a son out there. As far as I can see, it'd be a good thing if some of them did die.
Well, a lot of Germany is dead. Our last bombing was directed against their communications, against convoys, trains, road and rail bridges, against goods yards, stations.
The vast majority of alternative history and prepper channels online focus only on one aspect of invasion of their country, and that is resistance, fighting back, never giving in. Go Wolverines! But in reality, what does happen when countries are actually invaded for real? It's not exactly Go Wolverines, and that has major problems as we'll get into in a future episode. But that's best left to fantasizing channels. I'm going to look at the reality of all of this. What happens when you go to war? What happens when you're invaded? What happens when you're occupied? What happens when the occupiers are beaten? What, as Churchill put it, do? You have to carry on.
This is London. You will now hear a statement by the Prime Minister.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Sobering stuff, it shouldn't have been a surprise. My mother was born to very elderly parents on the 4th of June 1940, pretty much 9 months exactly after the date of the declaration by Great Britain on war with Germany. So strangely enough, my existence and my life on this planet I owe to Adolf Hitler. I don't like him, but it's true. The German invasion of Poland in 1939, closely followed by the Russian invasion of Poland in 1939, shouldn't have come as a surprise to anybody, but it did. But sometimes war can come as a surprise.
President Roosevelt appears before a joint session of the Senate and House of Representatives and with stern vigor delivers his war.
And dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Congress, with overwhelming acclaim, then voted the declaration of a state of war, and the President signed it 3 hours after this historic scene.
The rest, as they say, is history. But what actually happens the day war's declared?
The government have given instructions for the following important announcements. Closing of places of entertainment. All cinemas, theatres and other places of entertainment are to be closed immediately until further notice. In the light of experience, it may be possible to allow the reopening of such places in some area. They are being closed because if they were hit by a bomb, large numbers would be killed or injured.
Like the pandemic, they close everything and they don't want people gathering. They don't want them to gather because, as they say, and it's nice that they give a rationale for this type of a closure, they don't want them to be bombed en masse.
Sports gatherings and all gatherings for purposes of entertainment and amusement, whether outdoor or indoor, which involve large numbers congregating together, are prohibited until further notice. This refers especially to gatherings for purposes of entertainment, but people are earnestly requested not to crowd together unnecessarily in any circumstances. Churches and other places of public worship will not be closed.
God will help them, I guess.
If poison gas has been used, you will be warned by means of hand rattles. If you hear hand rattles, do not leave your shelter until the poison gas has been cleared away. Hand bells will be used to tell you when there is no longer any danger from poison gas.
It's hard to understand it now, but poison gas attacks on urban areas like London was a serious concern, and they actually thought that's what would happen during the Second World War. But neither side actually ever dared use poison gas offensively. However, Germany, as we know, did use it on large numbers of population that they wanted to kill in internment camps.
Schools. All-day schools in evacuation and neutral areas in England, Wales and Scotland are to be closed for lessons for at least a week from today. The precise date of reopening schools in reception areas will be decided by the authorities of the schools. In reception areas, schools should be reopened as soon as arrangements for the education of the children evacuated to the locality can be completed.
September 1939, in 3 days, the British government evacuated 1.5 million people out of urban centres, mostly in the south of England, but some northern cities as well. And for those people out there who are watching this who are teachers, the teachers were effectively drafted and also evacuated with their children. Would we see a similar mass planned evacuation of children out of our cities in the event of World War III? I have my doubts. And for those people out there who are thinking, well, we're going to leave the cities anyway, you might not be able to, as we shall see.
Keep off the streets as much as possible. To expose yourself unnecessarily adds to your danger. Carry your gas mask with you always.
Get off the streets. No crowds. Pretty much everything is closed. Oh yeah, and poison gas is about to drop from the skies, so carry a gas mask. This is going to make pretty much everybody take the threat of violence from Germany fairly seriously.
Make sure that you and every member of your household, especially children able to run about, have on them their names and address clearly written. Do this either on an envelope or something like a luggage label, not on an odd piece of paper which might get lost. Sew the label onto your children's clothes where they cannot pull it off.
Now, was this done to find lost kids? Well, no. It was done to identify bodies, and they didn't want you to write it on a piece of paper because clothing and pieces of paper would be blown off your body when you're hit by a bomb.
The London tube railways are required for traffic purposes, and the tube stations are not available as air raid shelters.
As we all know, when the Germans switched to attacking the cities and effectively lost the war, if they carried on hitting the airfields, we would have lost the war. The underground stations of London became unofficial shelters, and the government tried to close them down initially, but eventually they became official. They were the obvious place to hide at night from air raids, and pretty much all the air raids came mostly during the war at night until the end of the war. I can't bring myself to say God save the King, but I can say God save us all. What happened to Germany when the Allies crushed their armed forces and occupied them would be very similar to what would happen, I believe, to North America if we were ever invaded.
We not only smashed up the towns, but smashed up the links between the towns. And at the finish, life in Germany just ran down like a clock. Place and time meant nothing, because the links between the people were smashed too. They were just left wandering, searching, looking for food, looking for their homes, looking for each other. There are 70 million people in Germany, and about 30 million of them are looking for someone, or are lost and lie looking without seeing, like the eyes of a dead rabbit. They are still stunned by what hit them, stunned by the war they started. But in the search for food and the urge to get home, the life force is beginning to stir again. Today, our powers of destruction are terrifying, but the will to live is still stronger. That's why we can't wash our hands of the Germans, because we can't afford to let that new life flow in any direction it wants. Our military government, that is, your husbands and sons, have to prod the Germans into putting their house in order. Why? We have an interest in Germany that is purely selfish. We cannot live next to a disease-ridden neighbor. And we must prevent not only starvation and epidemics, but also diseases of the mind, new brands of fascism from springing up.
The language used is interesting in this video. They're trying to make the population switch from hating Germany, hating Nazis, being happy to bomb many, many children and women to win the war because of the evil that Germany is, to make us feel a little bit more that we should actually like them and that they are actually probably, underneath it all, human beings. For a few moments, just have a think. What would it be like if China or Russia invaded North America and occupied us and set up a military government? I'm assuming in this set of videos nuclear weaponry is not used on North America because that creates an entirely different scenario. They're likely to want to correct our imperialism. They're likely to want to correct our liberalism. They'd like to want to do a whole bunch of things that we might not be agreeing with, but we would have no choice. But what is certain is a land invasion of Russia, of China, or of America, or of Canada, or of Western Europe would result in enormous devastation, enormous loss of life, even without the use of any nuclear weaponry.
And where, in the meantime, do they live? Yes, all looks lifeless. But underneath the rubble, there are people living in the cellars. The smoke from the cooking stoves drifts up from the ruins to the open third story where people are living too. Many in the big towns living without light, without coal, without water, without soap, living in the stench of corpses and sewerage, but still with the will to live.
This is apocalyptic and it's very hard to prep for or even deal with in the aftermath. Remember, if there is a nuclear war, there will be no external help at all. And if Chinese or Russian troops show up to occupy what's left of North America, they'll probably take whatever's left and send it home. But what about the children?
But the greatest headache is education. You will never get Nazi ideas out of the heads of some of the adults, particularly those living away from the devastated areas. What about the children? For them, the desolated landscape provides a dream playground. The derelict weapons of war might have been specially designed to have games with. The teachers must be found and themselves taught to teach the children that there are other things in life beyond Nazism and war. But again, the complexity of problems. The schools are in ruins, the teachers too few, the children too many. And as the months go by, the children are growing up and getting more like their fathers.
Whoa, women were Nazis as well. But what happened to the German army? The German population was about 70 million people, and of them, 13.6 million were conscripted into the armed forces. So those people out there saying, if we go to war with Russia, will there be a draft? Yeah.
To the wire cages all over Germany, the master race of men are slubbering along. They are stripped of their insignia, deloused, numbered. But this mass of humanity has to be sorted out into something like order. Not only their bodies, but also their minds.
So to summarise, if war is imminent or starts, they're going to close all entertainment, all sports, everything will be closed. There'll be nothing open. No bars will be open. Everything will be probably immediately shut down. Now, highways and trains and airports are probably also going to be closed to most, if not all, of civilian traffic almost immediately or very shortly after war starts. They're going to be there for military use only. The entire economy, the entire society will only have one aim from then on, and that is to be victorious and win the war. There will be nothing else other than that, at least in the short term. On TV and radio will be saturated by probably old radiation and nuclear war films. All media is going to be government controlled immediately. I wouldn't be surprised if Facebook and YouTube and everything else is actually blocked and shut down immediately war starts. I really wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I'd be really shocked if they allow us to keep making videos and telling you what we think about what's going on. And to do so, as we're going to get into, would be incredibly stupid of us to do. Now, they shut the schools, but that's because of the evacuation process. But I think the situation in 1939 in Britain is a little different from where it is in North America. I wouldn't expect the schools to close. I really wouldn't. They're going to try and keep a level of normalcy in society, so it would be interesting to see. But I do think the schools will remain open until the bombs start falling. Now, if I had a child, and I don't, as soon as war is imminent, I would get the child out of school, no matter where they are, and I would bring them home, and I would bug out with them if war was imminent. If war started, I would try to do that. But as I said, it might be harder than you're anticipating. In the event of war, all of our grocery stores and convenience stores will immediately infect rationing based on purchase power. You won't be allowed to buy over a certain dollar amount of goods. Smart governments would rush in within days rationing systems. What we have now, we might only have at the end of the war, and we may not be able to get more food, and we may not be able to get anything else for a while. It might be weeks, months, or years. And remember, initially they're going to tell us we won't be dropping nukes, nuclear war is impossible, and we will sort this out. It's going to be over in a matter of weeks. That's what we're going to be told. That's what we were told in 1914. That's what we were told in 1939. If we go to war, it's going to be total war, and it will be to the end. Expect people to build trenches and concrete bunkers everywhere they can if they can get supplies. Supplies are going to be quite difficult to get, and we're going to get into that in a different video later on about what you actually should have in place now, because if war is imminent or starts, you're not going to be able to get it, but you probably would want it. For a time there'll be fear and calm and false optimism as we await an invasion or bombing or war to actually be fought viciously. People won't quite believe it's going to go that far. They never do. They didn't in 1939 and they didn't in 1914. For sure, the Ukrainian and the Ukrainian government did not expect Russia to invade, and looking back on it, it's kind of obvious that Russia was going to invade given the provocations that Russia believed it was experiencing. So, whoa, windy. War is never a surprise. When Pearl Harbor was hit by the Japanese, it was after America banned the import of oil into Japan to get Japan out of China. And Japan had one choice: quit China, which they invested a lot of time, money and effort and believed it was their right to conquer, or attack America. They attacked America. Not blaming America for that. I'm just saying, people are rational agents and they do irrational things like war for rational reasons to them. And to discount that and say it can't happen or people just won't do that is denial. And denial has no place in prepping. Well, God help us all if we do this in 2023. I sincerely hope we don't. Thanks for watching, and toodles! This video has been brought to you by 21st Century Wolfie Productions 2023.